Welcome to Tech Simplified, and my name is Sly Gittins. I have the outstanding Amy Cisse, and she is the CEO of Cisse IT Solutions. And I wanted her just to share her story because when she told it to me, I couldn't believe it was real. And I'm excited to be able to share it to everyone who's listening out there or watching this. So, Amy, let me not steal your thunder. Would you mind giving us some background into your journey and how you got into your first position?
Sure. Thank you for having me first and foremost. So I am from the Washington, D.C. area, born and raised. My family is from Sierra Leone, West Africa. So as you can imagine, growing up was a little different than my peers. But I think that the differences help to shape who I am today. I think there's two prominent memories that I can have that kind of transcended into my experiences now. So the first one was around just some people in my family, they kind of thought that I was a little too Americanized, right? But then you would have maybe some Black people that I would interact with who was, or just meet, who would say, you're not African enough, right? Or wow, I can't believe it. And so there's like this, I had to get to a point where I didn't feel the need to fit into anyone's ideas of who they thought I should be, or how I should speak, or how I should sound when I'm trying to speak, Creole. And so, yes, it sounds very Americanized. And so I think that kind of just transcends into like just being in the tech industry and being the only Black person sometimes, or the only female on the team, and just being okay with it. And I think that, my family coming here in the 70s, I just had to figure out a lot of things on my own, especially with college. It was, just figure it out. And I did. And even with, just as it relates to starting a business, it was me just figuring it out. I'm still figuring things out until today. So those are the two most prominent memories that I could have, and how it relates to where I'm at now.
No, that's awesome. And the funny thing for me is I can relate to that. My family is from Barbados, the Caribbean island. As you can tell, I have no Caribbean accent at all. So when I go back to Barbados, they're like, you're American. And then when I come, and then when I'm back in America, or like I live in Buffalo now and I'm from Brooklyn, right? They're like, you don't have a New York City accent. I'm like, well, I don't know. This is the way I talk, right? So there's that balance. And similar, like my parents, when I went to college, luckily my older brother went, so he was able to kind of help me a little bit. But in terms of tech, I had to figure out my own kind of lane, right? Because I wasn't a traditional tech person. A lot of my tech people got computer science backgrounds. They probably phenomenal in math. I was okay in math, but I went to more IT and marketing routes. It was like two things you don't hear go together, is IT and marketing, right? So I had to kind of find my own lane, but it was definitely hard trying to do that juggling. But I guess I got to a point in my career and my life to say, I'm just going to be me at all times. And I'm just going to figure it out, right? And that's similar to what I'm doing now. So that was fantastic. And it also gets into the next question. What was the educational path? Because you're an owner, and when we talk, you're very technical. So you got the gift of soft skills and tech skills. So how did you get to where you are today?
So I remember, I would say one of the most pivotal experiences that I had was just from the beginning, where I was able to have internships in high school at NIH. And the first tech job that I had, well, I did an internship in college as well at the Naval Research Lab, which was definitely helpful with me kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, whether it was building websites as a developer or writing code as a programmer. And so when I, finished college, I think both of those experiences helped me to understand the career path I wanted to go down. So I knew it was going to be around developing, writing code. And because I had previous experience with NIH, then this tech company, it was like easy for them because they were a government contractor. I already had that experience with the agency. And so I have my bachelor's and master's in computer science, a lot of IT certifications. And I worked at a number of different jobs, and that's easy to do in the tech industry, right? You can kind of hop around as much as you want, as long as you have the skills, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I remember just feeling like, I'm kind of over hopping around after I had a year of interviewing, whether they didn't like me or I didn't like them, like the company, it just wasn't working out. So I had to take a moment and pause and say, just because you think you're supposed to do it this way, it doesn't mean that that's the way that you're supposed to do it. So maybe you need to come up with some other thoughts and ideas and strategies for what your next steps are going to be. And that's when I started thinking about actually doing training on the side. It was SharePoint training, and I really loved it. And I figured out how to get some 1099 contract work. And that's how I started the business.
Now, that's fantastic. I think that's a really cool story because you started off in, going to school for it. You got your bachelor's and your master's. And then one thing you talked about is certifications because, one time I run into people like, I already got my master's, so I'm done learning. But they don't realize that's where the learning begins. I end up getting my bachelor's and haven't gone back to my master's, but consider getting my MBA possibly. But I've been taking certifications as well. And even that's why I started this channel, right? To give back, to train, to educate, to get more people in the field because, I've moved through my career a lot to different roles until I got to Microsoft now, where I like it a lot. But I still like to do my other outside activities. But in tech, as long as you got the skill set, you can do those things. So that was pretty awesome. So I guess I got a question for you: is someone who getting started in their career, right? Maybe they don't have the computer science background. Is there a place for them in tech? And
Oh,
and I guess my last question is, what would you have told yourself earlier in your career with the information that you have now? What conversation would you have? So those are two separate questions, but
yeah. So I definitely think that no matter who you are, if you want to get really good in tech, definitely just self-study.
yeah.
Um, Lots of videos, there's tons of conferences, there's tons of meetup groups where you can learn so much information. And the certification exams also give you some credibility. And so, I was thinking about when you said something about school with the master's program, people think that that's it. I thought the same thing. Like, I'm never going back to school. I'm over this. This is like overwhelming. But I just passed the MS 100 and the MS 700. That was it was actually a requirement for all of us and I said, you know what, let me just do it too. Let me take those certification exams. Yes, it was excruciating, but once you get past it, there's that sense of relief and just joy that you've gotten it done and you don't ever have to do it again with those, specific exams. So, technology is changing all the time. So it's like you can't get stale, right? If you get stale, then that means that you're not going to grow in your career. You may stay where you are, but you're not going to have any growth. And so you don't want to put yourself in a position where you don't really have options and you're not growing and you're not climbing, and you're not reaching this next level.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something, and right before you answer the next part of the question is you talked about not growing, right? And that's a big thing in this field. Like if you have the itch to learn, the information is there. Most of it is free. There is some paid training you can do, but there's so many options that you can learn through the vendors, right? Even if self-plug, you go on my website, I got free study guides for a lot of the Microsoft certifications because I realize sometimes people don't know how to get started or they don't have a plan how to study. And I used to struggle all the time, failing tests because I didn't make a good plan in the beginning that saves me so much time. Yeah, you can definitely do it. And it stops you from getting stale. And it's okay. It all depends on what your goals are. If you want to do the same solution for a while, that is possible. But what happens when that changes, right? What happens when the industry evolves? Because eventually it will. Will you have the skill set to be able to command what the market has for your skills? And I try to do that before I need them. I remember I was good at virtualization, right? And I was like, man, this is great. But I started realizing the VMware, Hyper-V is always getting saturated. So I'm like, man, security seems hot. Let me go learn that before I need to. And I was able to get new jobs there. Then I got a job where it's like they kept talking about cloud and buckets and containers and like Synapse databases. I was like, what are you even talking about? So I'm going to go learn that. Then I was able to get paid more. And then, like even in my job now, like I focus primarily, like I'm taking MS 700. I'm studying for the SC 100 actually right now to get that certification. But I'm starting to see data creep up a lot. And Power Platform creep up a lot. So I'm like, you know what? These are on to dockets for me to do later, right? Because I think these could help me going forward. Because I'm not a coder, but some of these drag and drop platforms are good. Like I remember I was a web developer in college, and then I saw Weebly come out, Wix come out, and Squarespace. I'm like, hold on, I might not have a job in the future. I might need to get some backup skills, right? And I see that. I'm not saying that's going to eventually happen for all code, but I'm starting to see this no code wave starting to pick up some more steam. So let me learn that. Or someone who doesn't code, right? Because my friends who do code say that's more work, but someone who doesn't code to me is I could get in the game, at least help out, right? So, but again, as I say, I think you said a lot of good things. I just wanted to share that is I get a lot of questions, especially on TikTok or Instagram, where I'm talking to the younger youth, and I'm like, it's not too late, right? You can learn now, and you can outlearn myself, right? So because usually you got time when you're a little bit younger, right? So you can learn now, and it's free. So I know the next question was, what other advice would you have given yourself earlier in your career?
Speak up for yourself.
Okay.
So I just remember times especially early on in the tech industry, I was very shy, very reserved. And I remember this instance where a project manager came onto the team, and I remember feeling slighted because it was a team of developers, and I was the only one that actually knew several programming languages and scripting languages and how to connect them with databases, applications with databases. But I was ranked at a lower level than people who had more years of experience, right? And so, it could have been a teachable moment for him to understand that there's other factors that needed to be weighed in those types of decisions. Instead, I said, all right, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else. And so, it's like making sure that you value what you're doing, and letting other people understand your value as well.
And I think I could add on that is I remember early in my career, my manager, I got promoted quickly, right? But I did all the certifications on weekends. I took on extra projects. And as a tech person, I took more on business projects. I could learn the strategy, the sales. So I got promoted. So my manager was like, well, it took me till I was 30, 35 to make 100,000. And you're already 25 or 26 and you want to make it already. I'm saying like, I don't see what's the problem here. Because before I'm very passive. I don't really say anything. I'm like, I just reiterated like, well, I did everything you said on the checklist. I got the experience for some of it, and some stuff I got to learn. So I don't understand what else do I need to do to get to 100,000. He's like, well, you need to wait the time. I'm like, time is the only requirement. Like to me, that don't make any sense. If I could do the role and I could get it done, let's figure it out. And I was in a pre-sales role. So I was like, you know what? Let's take the risk from you. Let's make sure my base is a little bit lower and put it in my commissions. You set the goals, hit the goals, and I give them money. Everyone's happy. We can't do that, right? And so I remember that was the first time I told myself, well, I know I should be making this. Maybe it's time for me to look elsewhere. So then that's when I ended up looking elsewhere, and I was able to get what I wanted. But it took, earlier in my career before that, I usually would have said, okay, let me just wait and buy my time. But if you really have the skills, you got to be able to speak up for yourself, because people will speak over you. They will try to dominate if you don't say something. That doesn't mean I got apprehensive. I didn't raise my voice or get loud or yell. I just stated the facts. And I make sure even now when I'm in my manager roles, what do you need to be successful in your role as my manager? And what do I need to be doing to get to the next level? So I'm like a 63 at Microsoft. Next role for a senior role, like a 64. I'm like, all right, what I need to do? I've been doing for a year. I know I need a little bit more time, but what things do I need to show you that I'm ready for this next role, right? So now that we can build it out in each of my calls, I make sure to have those conversations. And then when we get there, and now if I still didn't get it, I'm like, hey, we did everything we were supposed to do. oh, maybe it's a downturn in the market. That makes sense. They might not increase. You might have to wait a little bit, right? But then you got to make a decision afterwards. So I thought that was really great that you just talked about that, because I'm very passive. I'm a person whose work speaks for itself, but sometimes you realize you got to speak up, or people will walk all over you. And there's graceful ways to do that, depending on the situation. So.
Now, I think that as a leader too, that it's important to recognize that some people may not feel comfortable speaking up for themselves. And I think that as a leader, you have to create that space where people feel like their voices are being heard, especially if you go through something like that. You don't ever want to recreate that same type of situation. And as leaders, you have the chance to do something better and be different and be better.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I learned that even in my personal life, right? I'm a little bit more forward. Like, just always been my personality. If I don't like something, I'm gonna tell you, right? But then I run into people who I could tell they don't like it, but they won't say anything. So I'm like, hey, did that make you uncomfortable? They're like, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, well, let's make sure this person doesn't do that. Or did I do that? And I didn't know that, so now I'm being better to say, like, I'm not forcing, Amy to fit my way to make me comfortable, right? I think that that empathy, that self-reflection, or that awareness is important to make it a little bit like the workplace, or just personal life in general, a little bit more comfortable, being able to adapt, because everyone isn't comfortable for confrontation, right? Or being able to have those crucial conversations or those tough conversations. But another question I wanted to get into is something that was very curious to me, because sometimes, as someone who's looking at CEOs, I can only imagine how many emails you get a day. You got to manage that. I can't imagine the day-to-day that it takes a toll on being a founder and a CEO, because it's different being a CEO of a corporation that's been established and someone who's founding it, building it, and overseeing it. So what's the day in the life of a founder?
My inbox is flooded with emails. And so I have an amazing team. You cannot do it alone at all. I mean, I had to do it alone for a long time in the beginning, but having help is just extremely important. I try to make sure that our clients and our partner companies are also including my project manager and also my VP of operations on emails, so that I don't miss them, because I will. And so I have had to really reflect and just refocus on my time. I don't have a lot of it. And so, but I have to have this balance, right, of being healthy, and not being too stressed out, and making decisions. And no one ever told me how much paperwork, administrative duties come along with owning a business. I was focused in the beginning on providing technical solutions, and I still have to help people on the team with, maybe I might have background information on the client's environment, and I have to help them, talk them through issues, or sometimes just come up with like strategies. And I have to think about the big picture. It's not just what we're doing now, it's about what we're doing in the future, providing that direction, having just great communication with the team and the clients. And it's payroll, right? Making sure people get paid, and making sure that these taxes are filed and forms are filled out, and all kinds of issues, to be quite honest. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Yeah. And it's having proper communication channels to make sure that the team has support, the client work is getting done. I love processes. I love efficiencies. We use Teams heavily to make sure everything is stored in a central place. It's a balance. I've had to also, so I'm still billable too, right? Not 8 hours billable, but I am still billable on certain contracts, because I want to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and people are being supported. But I did have to limit the time that I'm working on the billable work, of course, versus the administrative work. And just, I used to work 16-hour days, and I had to stop. And I used to think that I was superwoman, right? Being able to, I have a child, and I have to take care of me. And I was spending so much time focusing on the business that, my body just shut down. And my doctor was like, you just can't do that. And so I try to now limit my days to no more than 8 hours a day. For a while, I stopped working on weekends too. And if I do work on the weekend, it may be just a couple of hours, literally, because I have, heard of other stories of CEOs and founders who may have like health issues, and because or it's just not even those titles, but just people who work themselves to the ground where your body just can't take it anymore. And I want to show up and be ready and available for my son and for myself. So boundaries and limits. I'm a boundaries person too. I can say, no, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. Yes.
Yeah, that is, I'm glad you share that, because I feel like sometimes we hear the glamour of the role. We see all the success. We see when a CEO doesn't make it or a founder doesn't make it, but we don't see the behind the scenes. Like I like to show the shooting of the movie, the stages, the acts, the mental stress. How does that affect the family? Because I remember I switched from, a large corporation to a startup, and, I was the director of product marketing. I went from working maybe 8 hours a day, some days, 6 hours a day, to working 12 to 13 hours a day every day. And then, that company was based in Israel. So that's a different time zone. So I'm working on Sundays, on Saturdays, so I just had my daughter at the time, and, I'm just losing it because I'm not spending time with my daughter. My wife is getting upset, and I can tell my health is taking a toll because I'm not going to the gym. I'm not meditating. I'm just trying to get the stuff off the ground. I had to ask myself, is it worth it?
Right.
I could figure it out. I was going fine. And then I was like, let me just choose me. I'm out. I ended up going back to a little bit larger of a company, still did a good job there, but I chose me for then because I just knew for me, I want to be a fantastic dad, right? That's number one. Always wanted to be a dad. I don't care about anything else. I need to be able to get old and run around with those kids. So that's the main goal, right? And then from that, everything kind of just took over, but that was just for me. Even though, I got houses, like I own businesses outside of work, right? So I like to work. That doesn't stop. But now I made sure it's non-negotiable. I go to the gym early in the morning, except for today. My little guy had a cold at 8 months, so I had to snuggle him a bit. But I'm gonna enjoy those because one day I won't be able to snuggle him anymore because he ain't gonna want no hugs from dad, right? But I told myself I'm not negotiable. Like today I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna find time, even though I got things to get done, that my health is not negotiable, even for my wife. Like she stays at home, but I tell my wife, I'm like, when you need to go to the gym, you go in the gym. And she tells me 6 p.m. she going to the gym. I don't care what I'm doing. I tell my team, don't schedule anything from 6 to 8 because that's when my wife get her time out. She needs that time because that's what we need, like bare minimum, right? So, or we just find ways to do it. But I can't stress enough that health aspect is that sometimes we work so hard, we get these degrees, we go to the next thing, then we forget the main thing that's paying the bills is our health, right? And
Right.
I've seen people CEOs, like you said, who don't make it. I see like successful people who spend all their time working and they don't make it to their 30s, right? And then you go back, you see that they wasn't making good health decisions. So I can't stress enough the health part of it because it's essential, or even like mental health, right? Like take the time if your company offers that. Take anything you can, go work out or whatever you do to de-stress. Like I write a lot in my journal. For me, I find that a way to deal with some of that stress, right? So just wanted to make sure I said that because sometimes we focus on the hard skills and all these things, but at the end of the day, we need time and we need our bodies, right?
Right.
So this goes
Yeah.
into the next. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you brought up you mentioned meditation,
Yeah.
and I actually started doing that about a year ago, and it just really helps to just relieve the stress. Um, and see myself also sometimes following some of those practices like right before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
I used to really, really struggle with sleep issues, not really even connecting until later on down the road that sleep deprivation causes a ton of issues with your metabolism slowing down, gaining weight. and having and it even increases like the risk of heart disease. And so sleep is like the foundation. And if you're not getting that, I see that it really takes a toll on my body.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, and I have a 5 meeting max that I try to do per day. And I had to incorporate this because one day on a Friday, I had 12 meetings.
Wow.
and, and so if you can imagine, like you said, the mental toll, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have a chance to like mentally shift. You don't have a chance to like mentally prepare. You're just jumping from meeting to meeting and you don't have time to eat. And that's not good either. And so, yes, last week I had 7 meetings and 9 meetings in a day and I have to refocus, right? And move some things around because you just can't do it all.
Correct. Yep. And then that's great. Like even I put in my room right over here as a bike. So I just forced myself. I had 10 minutes between my call. I'm gonna get 5 minutes on the bike.
Nice.
Just to get me to change, or I run downstairs because I work from home and go see the kids, hug them, squeeze them, and come run back up, get something to eat for a bit, just to break it or a bit. Or I found for me, like sometimes you don't need to use an app or sit with your legs crossed and meditate. I find like I like being near the water, right? I go by the water and just walk for a bit, and it might just be 5 minutes, like 10 minutes, or sometimes I could take my call, some meetings, especially with an individual contributor. You're not talking on the call. You just need to be on it. So I just took my call and walked by the water, So, or, even when I was in the office, I would go outside for a bit, walk around the building, come back in just so I could get that time to think, because sometimes those creative bursts come during those times anyway. So, I'm glad that we're talking about it, because I think it's something that should be talked about even more, is that mental health, because you're right. If you don't sleep, I remember when I wasn't sleeping I had temper problems, right? Because I'm like, break like little things that shouldn't get you upset. You like, I don't want to hear that right now because I'm just trying to stay awake right now, So had to go deal with that. Then I had to have problems of just falling asleep anywhere. Like I remember I was driving and and I just remember just the whole thing started getting foggy. I had to go pull over to go to sleep. But what if I would have fell asleep, man? I would have hurt myself doing these things. So it was like we can push our bodies. I know some people like to say push your body to the limit, and which is good at times. But if you continue to do it, it can have some long-term effects. So
Right.
something that we kind of talked about a little bit, but I want to kind of still explore a little bit more. What skills do we need to be successful in tech? I find out when I'm looking online, because I love to, nerd out, look at it. Y'all talk about certifications. Y'all talk about self-learning. I try to talk a little bit more about soft skills, but from your perspective, from a CEO and someone who hires people on a day-to-day basis, or at least monthly basis, right? What do you look for in a tech? And I know that's kind of generic because it's different from entry level, mid-level, senior level, executive. But generally, what if someone who's exploring to come into tech, what should they be focused on? Is it hard skills primarily? Are you looking for soft skills? Or if someone's coming in, do you look for like intuition? Do they have the grit and you can build on the hard skills? Like what, how do you look at that?
It varies, especially when you mention level of expertise, right? So I do like when people are I guess the best way to put it is kind of when they put themselves into a number of different types of spaces in the tech industry to grow. So what I mean by that is that I found some people who are maybe speakers at different events. If you spend your weekend going to a Microsoft 365 conference all day on a Saturday, I mean, that shows some dedication, right? It shows that you're really interested in it. It shows that you like to geek out, right? And you like to go to these user groups and kind of feed off of each other. And so it's that extra level of effort that speaks volumes. And one of the things that I'll say is this person that I just recently brought on board, I was impressed with her because she was a legal secretary and she got a bunch of IT certifications, and she is very driven, and that to me is impressive. And you don't need to have sometimes like all the credentials in the world. Sometimes it's about just showing how motivated you are. And because that takes a lot of effort to be self-disciplined enough to say, I'm going to go do these extra things. And it's about personality too. It's about rapport. It's about, do our personalities kind of match in the sense of knowing that you'll go above and beyond, like I'm going to do for our clients, without, overwhelming yourself, but that dedication of, I want to get this job done, and I want to make sure that I'm growing and progressing for myself, because that's going to shine through when, if you're passionate about something, it's going to speak volumes in your work.
Yeah, and I think that's you said it, I think you summed it up pretty well, man. That's like a mic drop moment right there. I think sometimes people don't see the work that you do. Like sometimes I had a few friends who lost a job and having a hard time. I'm like, become a student again. LinkedIn Learn. He's like, I don't have any money. I'm like, sign up for LinkedIn Learn and get the first 30 days. See how much you can learn in 30 days. I'm telling you, you got nothing but time because right now you're unemployed, right? So just learn as much as possible, because if I was interviewing, I'm like, well, what did you do during the 6 months that you was unemployed? Well, I took 6 certifications. Oh, I found out Microsoft Virtual Days give you a free voucher. So I ended up taking the AZ 900 for free. I went out to one of these meetups and I started making connections. So now I'm also, let's say, a AWS practitioner, right? I got all these things on my own. I just wasn't given a chance. When by the time you get to that interview, now you got a story to tell, right? Or for myself, like me having a marketing background sometimes and the gift to gab, instantly, as soon as someone sees me, you're a sales rep. I'm like, well, I don't mind selling, but I also am pretty technical, So I got tired of having to keep saying it. So I made the YouTube channel and started showing it. Like I can configure all the stuff. I had a DL, I think 380 G5 in my rack in my closet. I had to set up, do all the stuff. Or like when I worked at RSA. So then people knew I was technical, but I understand the business priorities. And that's kind of the way I did it. And I would spend weekends. Like I gave up summer sometimes. I'm like, you know what? I told my parents, I'm like, yo, I want to see y'all for a couple summers. I'm hibernating for 2 months. I got these 3 certifications I got to get. I see y'all in the wintertime, and I went and got the certs. I made sure I went on LinkedIn and, connected. Even when I met you at work, I reached out and said, hey, did you want to do this? But before I even did it, I'm like, hey, here's what I've done already. Like, this is not something I just thought of. It's been work that put into it. But I say these things is that sometimes you got to go the extra mile because you don't know who you're competing with, right? And what I found is I'm competing with myself, but we got global candidate pools now, right? So how do you stand out? How does someone like you, who is the founder and the CEO of a business, so each hire is critically important, right? Whereas like Microsoft or these large billion or trillion-dollar companies can absorb a loss, right? Where, so help them make the decision easy, right? And you don't need to have all the skill sets, because I have one of my good friends who doesn't have a tech degree, who doesn't have only a little bit of college, and out earns me in every way because this lady is phenomenal. Right, the way she studies, the way she builds accounts, the way she was a detail, like she was just a superstar, and it showed because she's already a manager already. You know what I'm saying? And I think I think she's a director now, right? And she's way younger than I am. So I'm like, but I seen that from the beginning, right? So it all depends on I guess my parents always tell me, if you decide that you can do it, you're right. If you decide you can't, you're right? So if this is something you want, what are you willing to do? And of course, do that within means. I'm not saying to hurt yourself or anything or neglect yourself, but if you want it, it's out there. Like I get online, they're like, Sly, no one's not giving me an opportunity. I'm like, well, I just saw 3.8 million jobs open. Some of them, what can you do? Like I used to stay up. I still sometimes do that. Like I want to be a senior leader or a CEO one day. I got up here, kind of my key things that what skills I have and what skills I need to build and how can I go about doing that, right? Do I need to go get an MBA or can I do that organically some other places, right? I still have goals on where I want to go to. But yeah, I think sometimes we focus primarily on the technical skills, but not also sometimes the soft skills and that grit or that passion. Because you can see when someone's really passionate about something, you don't got to worry about, like, is Sly gonna talk about tech? He created a tech show on his free time, right? You know what I'm saying? Like his free time, this is what I do. So I want to do it. Now you got to make sure I stay focused. That's another story. But those are things you can do. And I guess this goes into the next question. What is your passion?
Oh yeah, it's all tech.
Okay.
Well, there's tech, I have another one too that I just thought about, but the reason why tech is the primary passion is because I just really love helping companies figure out how to make technology work better for them, like how it helps people do their jobs easier. When I could solve a problem, come up with a solution, that to me is everything. It's very gratifying, and I am the person who I will. I don't give up until I figure out what the solution is. I have this thing where I also dream about solutions. This, this started back in college. I used to love calculus, and whenever I would get stuck on a calculus problem, I would dream of ways to figure out how to solve the problem.
That's amazing.
And it happens to this day. Last week, no, it was earlier this week actually. There was something that I was trying to figure out, and I had a dream about it. Jumped on my computer first thing in the morning, and I just went and configured it, and I was like, there it is.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's to your point of sometimes solutions come to you in those weird times or different times where you're not even in front of your computer.
Yeah, because your mind is already thinking of that solution, right? My parents, when I was younger, used to say, instead of asking me, when I used to say I can't do something, they told me to say, how can I do it? And the fact that I ask myself, how can I, it changes the brain and it makes you look for solutions, right? And then that just shows your passion. Like, because since I was 8 years old, I always loved computers. As soon as I saw it, like, man, I joked with my wife, that was my first love, was a computer when I saw it for the first time, because I could do whatever I want in terms of getting out of my neighborhood. I could learn something new. I could learn a new technology. I could fix it. It was just fun. And then I also found I love teaching about it, right? And I love to do it in my own way. I didn't want to be necessarily a teacher, but I create these tools to help people to get better, right? Like, I think technology, even if you're not a technologist in a traditional sense, it's taken over our whole lives. All of us have a phone that we leverage, right? All of us use technology in some capacity, right? So even if you're not doing it from a day-to-day, like solving solutions like you are, or me, like training people, or even implementing it, right? So you still can use it in your day-to-day. Like I remember one of my good friends, my wife, sells elderberry syrup, and a free plugin, mollyselderberry.com. Go check her out. But she sells elderberry syrup. She had to build a website, right? Then she also had to figure out how she's going to do global shipping, how the cost is. We do that through the website. We working on building her an app for a better efficiency. She's not a technologist at all, but it helps her business. You know, one of my good friends is a speaker, a traveling speaker, but he has a website, he has apps, he uses podcasts to reach more people, social media, a way we can meet. Again, or the simple invention as a phone. Now we got FaceTime. Like, that's amazing. Like, I can literally just I called my mom in Brooklyn the other day, and I just talked to my cousin in Barbados, and we could see each other. They could see my daughter. Like, these inventions are like transforming the way we live. So even if you're not a technologist, and you're just, in some other type of field, if you learned a little bit, how can it make your job a little bit better or your life a little bit better?
I have to tell you real quick about my second passion.
Okay.
Food. I love to eat. I love to cook.
Yeah.
I love exploring different cuisines.
Yeah.
That is my favorite favorite pastime. It's food.
Oh, that's amazing. I can see that's something I love too, because my family's Barbados. So I grew up eating Caribbean food all the time. Then I grew up in Brooklyn. So then you get different food. You get from Italian, like in New York, you get anything you want. Then I had a whole bunch of friends who was Pakistani, who thought I liked that food. That food is solid. Then my friends were Spanish. Then I'm like, hold on, we got rice and beans too in Barbados, but y'all did a little bit different with the seasoning. Then, like, I just love it. Like, I just ate ramen again. Like, I love ramen. I go out, and I was in Seattle at the Microsoft office, and he had this amazing ramen spot. Like, I love it. Like, I'm learning how to get better. My wife and I started doing cooking together now. She brought in Italian. I brought in Caribbean, fuse it all in one. I love food, man. I can eat all day long. I should get paid to do that. I need to figure out how to do that. I'd probably be too big, though, if I did that.
Well, I'm actually considering at some point in life, maybe going to culinary school, because that's how much I love it. So I watch cooking shows, everything.
Can you share some favorite books or podcasts that really connected with you or resonated with you?
So I have this book here. It's called Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And the reason why I like this book is because it helped me. So if you think about it, right, my background is technology, it's not financials. I had to learn to become better with financials for the business.
Yeah.
And so it helped me to actually create my income statements from scratch. And when you do that, you really understand, your revenue, you understand your expenses, and it also helped me to calculate profit margins. So yeah, this book was definitely, it was referred to me by I think a partner company, Microsoft partner company. Yeah, and it's definitely been very helpful.
That sounds amazing because I think, again, when you're in tech, we focus so much on the hard skills, but that skills, again, that would help him. Like I remember switching into a sales role one time and forecasting or
Yes.
like balance sheet recognition. Like sometimes when I'm working with my customers, I had to do like a technical plan, had to go look at their 10K to figure out, all right, well, on your 10K, it says you want to invest in this area. So why aren't we building solutions in this area so we can make sure that your investors are happy? You know,
Mm.
you never thought about it that way, right? But I didn't learn that in school. Like I taught that myself,
Right.
But I'm gonna add that book to my reading collection ASAP because I never read that book. Yeah,
There's a podcast that I like. It is the um, Microsoft 365 Government Community Calls. And it's actually hosted by AdPoint in conjunction with some people at Microsoft. And it's very helpful because they talk about government specific like releases and features because when you are working in 365, the way that features are released to government clouds are different than the commercial clouds. And so sometimes you may see there's an announcement about a new feature, but then you're going to check government and it's not there yet. And so this podcast is really helpful with shaping like what's coming out.
yeah.
Um, and then I believe someone on the team's product group is on those calls as well. And so they do a fantastic job also of just announcing their releases, and they keep in line with commercial releases mostly.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're getting to the end. I don't want to end because we're having a great conversation. So before we end, I have two questions. Is A, what causes are you or charities that you spend your time on? Would you want to give them a shout out at the end? And then the last question is, how can the audience contact you after this?
Sure. So I work with this nonprofit called Learn Serve International. It's a really cool organization because they work with high school students in the DC area to help them become entrepreneurs. So I've worked with them for years, served in roles as a mentor or a judge at their pitch competitions. The students are usually working on their ventures around social impact. And so they're global causes sometimes, or maybe they're local to their communities, but they really do a fantastic job with helping to build up the high school students to become entrepreneurs.
All right, sweet. That's awesome. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes so our listeners and our viewers can check it out.
Thank you. And last but not least, I'm on LinkedIn and also Twitter. I get a lot of LinkedIn requests, so please add a note if you reach out to me and reference this podcast.
Sweet. Well, that is it. It was been my pleasure. I'm always thrilled just to listen to your story, Amy, because I feel like just you accomplished so much, and I can't wait to do part 2 in the future because I know you're gonna conquer some more mountains, right? So again, thank you for joining, and I'm glad I had you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Sly Gittens and Amy are out. Peace.